Washington High School. I am Miss Thody. I am a science teacher here. I am joined by Professor Drew Gorman-Lewis and Mr. Miller-Adams today. Today we're going to be jumping into our Diversifying Science at Lake Washington High School project. So we're going to start off with Mr. Miller-Adams asking Professor Drew Gorman-Lewis some questions about his science career, and then we'll end off our interview with some questions that you all asked me to ask him. But Mr. Miller-Adams, go ahead and jump into it.
Thank you very much. And hello, Lake Washington High School. This is really exciting. Really happy to be working with Ms. Thody on this project. And you'll probably hear from me more than once. So we'll get to know each other as we go through this particular time together. Today, we have a really interesting and exciting guest that I know you're going to enjoy meeting. This is Professor Drew Gorman-Lewis. He's at the College of the Environment at the University of Washington, main campus in Seattle. And he has a really interesting story. So thank you for joining us, Professor. May I call you Drew, Professor?
Definitely.
Okay. Well, Drew, let's start with a little bit of the background. Well, help us understand where you went to high school and then where you went to college.
So I'm from Eugene, Oregon, and I went to South Eugene High School. And I stayed in Eugene to do my undergraduate degree at the University of Oregon. And after that, I went to the University of Notre Dame in Indiana.
Impressive. Now, when did you start to discover that you had some interest in science?
Honestly, when I was a small kid, I loved to go in the kitchen and take all sorts of ingredients and mix them together like I was creating potions. And of course, vinegar and baking soda, that was my favorite, right? Because you get the nice little explosion. And so, fortunately, my parents recognized that as curiosity and let me do it. I also love to take things apart, like small electronics, because I wanted to understand how they worked. And you can imagine as a child, taking apart electronics, it's probably not a great idea, especially because I usually couldn't put them back together in working fashion. So instead, my mom would take me to Goodwill and buy me broken electronics to then take home and take apart so I could see what was going on inside. So from a very early age, I think my parents really recognized that I had that curiosity, and they really fostered it.
That's exciting. It's really interesting that your parents were willing to let you attempt to burn down the house to explore your interest in science. That must have been very exciting. So you go through high school and then you start thinking about going to college and you head off to college. And when did you start to focus in on the area that you're now doing your research on?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I really focused on languages. I was taking French and Spanish, both at the AP level, but in completing all the general requirements, I also took chemistry and physics, and I really liked chemistry, but it never occurred to me that that would be something that I could do or should try to do. So when I went to the University of Oregon, I signed up for my language classes, but I was at such an advanced level that I was having trouble getting into like the 300 and 400 level classes because I was always registering last as a freshman. So those classes would fill up. So instead, I started to take some of my general education requirements and saw that Geology 101 fit into my schedule. I was like, okay, well, I'll take that. And I also saw that chemistry, intro chemistry fit my schedule. I was like, I liked chemistry in high school. I'll take that. And my first day in my chemistry class, my professor, Nancy Dean, said that part of her goal of teaching was to help get underrepresented students into science. And no one had ever said that in any class I'd ever taken before. And it felt like she was talking directly to me. And even though it was just a single sentence, what it did was make me comfortable to go to her for help when I needed it. I wasn't intimidated. I wasn't scared to say, I don't understand this. And so she was really instrumental in setting me on this path very early. And that's when I decided, well, maybe science is something I can do. And I ditched languages and went down the science route.
Well, that's interesting. Now, what was your degree in at the University of Oregon?
So I ended up, I declared myself as a chemistry major, and that was going along well. I liked it. I did some undergraduate research in an organic chemistry lab. And while that was interesting, it was a little sort of disconnected from reality for me because I was synthesizing molecules that I had really no idea what they could be used for, if anything at all. And I found myself looking for something that felt a little more tangible. And so I took a class called environmental geochemistry. And suddenly everything clicked because we were talking about the environment and the chemistry going on in the environment, which is something we can see, something we can relate to. And so at that point, I decided to switch my major so I could take both chemistry and geology.
Wow. Now, when you go off to Notre Dame in South Bend, what was it like to walk onto that campus coming from Eugene, Oregon?
Complete culture shock. Yeah, that was a big adjustment, and not some place I would choose normally to live for 4 years. But I also recognized that I went there specifically because there was an advisor there who was doing the kind of research I was interested in, which was that those interactions between sort of water, rocks, and microbes that really shape our environment. So I knew it was going to be a finite amount of time. I only had to survive it for, about 4 years, and then I could move on to bigger and better things.
Okay. And so now you're on the University of Washington campus. When did you come to the College of the Environment?
I got here in 2008.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
Good. Good. Well, at this point, I'm going to stop asking questions. As you know, we gave you a heads up in advance that the students on the campus at Lake Washington High School have been coming together with questions for you. So we're going to launch into that Q&A, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Thody.
All right, I'm ready. Bring it on.
So the first kind of questions I have for you are actually about a little bit about your research. So I know that you do a lot of kind of environmental chemistry research, a lot with energy, a lot with water. So the first question that my students are asking is, what is the future of water on our planet, both our drinking water and our ocean water?
That's a good question. I would say that unless we start to really understand how water is a resource, an essential resource to us, and protect that resource, the future, I think, looks rather dim. There's every time we put something down the drain, every time we throw something in the trash, like we really need to start to think about where all this ends up.
Yeah, and kind of leading off of that question is maybe some recommendation that you could maybe offer to my high schoolers about what do you think that maybe individuals could be doing to kind of combat maybe this negative impact that they're having on our water as well as climate change in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's all about education, right? If we can start to understand, right, the connections of kind of everyday activities to these global problems, which oftentimes, really do seem kind of overwhelming. But we've got to really understand how individuals sort of add up to this collective whole that then impacts, our entire planet. So I think it starts with education. So once you know or know more about those impacts, then it's up to you to decide, do I want to be part of the solution or do I want to be part of the problem?
I love that, kind of telling my high schoolers to really listen up in our climate change unit. And then kind of a leading off of that question is, if you weren't a scientist, what would you be? So if you were to kind of go back and redo everything, I know that you kind of started off at a young age being like science and fixing things that were broken, but if you weren't a scientist, what would you be?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think about that actually often. I would probably have gone into computer science because I like programming. To me, it's kind of like solving a puzzle. You have this thing you want to do, and then you've got to come up with the pieces or the code to do it. And if not that, then probably would have been something like a bicycle mechanic or something.
But I can see that. Yeah, all of the fixing things and the tinkering.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so my other question kind of also connected to that is what kind of advice would you offer specifically to my high school students who are maybe BIPOC or people of color? What kind of advice would you offer to them who are seeking a science career?
Yeah, I think the thing that was so instrumental for me was finding not necessarily a full-on mentor, but somebody who I was comfortable enough with, who was familiar with academia, how sort of navigating through science majors works, and being able to just sit down and have some honest conversations with them. I wouldn't be here if there weren't, some key people, some key professors really along the way who facilitated that. And I was lucky enough to have one professor who recognized, this could be kind of your life. And he was able to hook me up with a program called the McNair program as an undergraduate, which was really designed to get underrepresented people into science and into graduate school with the eye of ending up in academia. So there are resources out there, but you've got to have kind of the people in your life who recognize the potential in you and can point you in the right direction.
I think that's really amazing to recognize seeking people out who are around you, who can always kind of elevate you, but also recognizing people in your life that you can be vulnerable with, who you can ask for help. And then my last question that I had for you is kind of going back in time and thinking about high school. So if you were to describe yourself in your high school experience, what were you maybe like?
I don't think I stood out much in high school. I played a couple of sports. I played tennis, which is also, not like a super popular sport. I don't think I stood out much. I was there. It was all right. That's really all I remember.
What about maybe your experience in like high school chemistry?
That was a lot of fun. Solving chemical problems was a lot of fun. There's some satisfaction to it that I can't really explain, but understanding kind of how things worked, being able to on pencil and paper work something out and getting the right answer, to me is just a great feeling.
I love that. Yeah, really focusing, like in my class, we're doing the chemistry and the earth system. So we're kind of taking the hybrid of your two loves of that chemistry component and that environmental component to really do these problem solvings or the puzzling phenomenons to really understand what's going on in our world. So I love that you're saying these things because I'm like, yeah, you listen up, high schoolers. But yeah, thank you so much. It was really great getting to meet you and interview you and get to offer some kind of insight into my high schoolers' lives and, increase that representation. So I really want to say thank you so much for both of your time.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much, Professor. Really enjoyed your time with us today. And if things ever improve and we can actually be together again, I can envision you on the campus at Lake Washington High School sometime in the future, sharing more about your career and what you've done, but could be a while. We'll see.
Well, I'd be happy to do it when we can.
Yeah, some vinegar and baking soda experiments.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Miller-Adams, and thank you so much, Professor Drew Gorman-Lewis, for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.